I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons, my Bibliosprand, Bibliohowlers, and Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means so much to me. Hi everyone, Petrik here. In today's video, we'll be talking about top 15 most amazing fantasy series that somehow never or rarely get talked about. I think many of us can agree that we have read plenty or maybe a lot of amazing fantasy series. Some that I or you consider to be some of the best fantasy series of all time, but somehow you just rarely see people talk about them. Whether it's in YouTube, in Instagram or Twitter, or maybe on Reddit, or everywhere really. So the purpose of this video, which is my video of the month, consider this my video of the month. So the purpose of this video is to highlight amazing fantasy series that is still considered underhyped. But this is not my list. So for this particular video, I asked on my Twitter account and also on my community tab, totaling to 300 readers. So I asked 300 readers their votes for the most amazing series that never get talked about. Or to make it easier to say, let's just call it underhyped fantasy series. Like, you know, based on experience and from your own analysis, people who end up giving this series a try end up loving them. But still, relatively few people talk about them. And the result of asking 300 fantasy readers, well, I got 250 series, 250 underhyped fantasy series. Obviously, it is impossible for me to mention each and every one of them on this video because 250, that's a lot. Plus, more than 200 of them are mentioned only once or twice. So there will be 3 categories in this video. First, the bronze category. The bronze category is for series that get mentioned 4 times. There are 10 series on this list. After that, we move on to the silver category. In silver category, we have 2 series. 2 series get mentioned 5 times. And finally, the gold category. In the gold category, there are 3 series. 3 series get mentioned 6 times. Now, this category doesn't mean that any of the series are better than the other, just that they are very underhyped, and it is likely that if you give it a try, according to 300 fantasy readers, these are the one that has the best chances of working nicely, of being loved by fantasy readers or epic fantasy readers. So yeah, without further ado, these are top 15 amazing fantasy series that rarely get talked about according to 300 fantasy readers, and I've read 7 of them. I will talk about them as well. So let's begin with the first series in the bronze category, and that is the Codex Alera by Jim Butcher. Now, Jim Butcher is very popular for his Dresden Files series. Dresden Files is one of my favorite series of all time. It is one of the best urban fantasy series, and I've caught up with the series, but admittedly for Codex Alera, I've read only 2 books and I DNF'd this series. But many people agreed that Codex Alera is a great series, and I think in a way they're kinda right that Codex Alera is underhyped because I rarely see the series being mentioned by anyone, even though it is actually a popular series, or supposedly anyway, because on Goodreads and Amazon, Codex Alera has many ratings. So maybe I don't know whether this is true or not, but maybe in the past many people talk about Codex Alera, but not now. Maybe. Codex Alera is a 6-book series, and if you haven't read the series, maybe check it out. I think from my experience and from my analysis, I think Codex Alera will be very suitable to those of you who are new to adult fantasy. The next series in the bronze category is the Queen's Thief series, 6-book series by Megan Whalen Turner. I think this one is a YA fantasy series, but I heard from plenty of people that this YA fantasy series can be enjoyed by both adult and young adult. I think it is one of those hybrid series like, let's say, Mistborn Trilogy. Mistborn Trilogy by Brennan Sanderson can be enjoyed by both adult and young adult fantasy readers. And I think Queen's Thief is one of those cases. And yeah, this one received 4 votes. And also, just like Codex Alera, I think Queen's Thief can be considered as a popular and also highly rated series based on the number of positive ratings on both Goodreads and Amazon. I think many people love this series, but then again, I rarely see this series being mentioned. I think I have seen, I think it is Reagan from Perry's Project, or maybe Al from Elliot Brooks talk about this series. And yeah, I think that's the only occasion where I have seen people talk about the Queen's Thief series. Now the next series in the bronze category, finally, is something that I've read to its completion, and it is a series that I really love and I consider both underrated and underhyped, and it is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. So The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham has been kind of gaining plenty of readership in the past 2 years. I think some of this are thanks to Alan from Library of Alexandria. He's been talking about this series non-stop, and I approve that. I approve that, Alan, because yes, this series is very much, both of them, underrated and underhyped. Not many people read this series despite James S.A. Corey's popularity. Daniel Abraham is one of the authors of James S.A. Corey, so The Expanse is very popular, but somehow Daniel Abraham's, his fantasy books are just not popular, and I think many readers just gave up with his series just after reading the first book, which I think it's kind of a shame. I mean, I can kind of agree that the first book is always the weakest for Daniel Abraham. The first book in his fantasy series are the weakest, but I think the first book are very much necessary for the rest of his series to shine. I've experienced that in Long Price Quartet. I've also experienced that in the Dagger and the Coin series, and both of them, I love them. And yes, both of them I consider to be underrated and underhyped. So it's great to see that few people consider The Long Price Quartet to be underhyped, and plenty of people who gave it a try lately have mentioned that they love the series. So I think it is worth taking a look. The next series in the bronze category is the Fire Sacraments Trilogy by Robert V. S. Redick. So this one begins with Master Assassin. Master Assassin is a book that has received many great praises from authors like Patrick Rothfuss and then Mark Lawrence and many more. Mark Lawrence actually considered Master Assassins to be a 6 out of 5 stars rating book. So, well, that is very rare from Mark Lawrence. I think he considered that only for the Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft and also Master Assassins by Robert Redick. And also Patrick Rothfuss mentioned that he cannot write a book as well as Robert Redick did for Master Assassins. So that is a very, very high endorsement. And I haven't read this series yet. I have actually read Master Assassin a long time ago, but I think I was in the wrong reading mood for it back then, because this one I think can be considered to be grimdark. I think it kind of fits into the grimdark subgenre. But if you love character-driven stories with great brotherhood as the main characters, I think you should give this one a try. And yeah, the writing was indeed lovely and stunning. And I heard the sequel to Master Assassins, Sidewinder, is even better. So yeah, make sure to check it out. And there is only one book left. I think right now I'm just waiting for the trilogy to be completed to read the series from the beginning to the end. And the next 4 series in the bronze category, all of them are in my list of favorite series of all time. And I want to make it clear once more that I didn't pick this series. These are all based on votes from readers, from 300 fantasy readers. I will leave the link to the community tab and Twitter post on the description down below so you can check the series being mentioned. Again, there are 250 series. And I'm really glad to see this next 4 series being mentioned. And the first one is the Licanius Trilogy by James Islington. Now, I constantly talk about the Licanius Trilogy on my YouTube channel and also on my Goodreads, but I think the readers are kinda right on this. The Licanius Trilogy, in my opinion anyway, deserves so much more readership. So much more. I think it is one of the most well-polished trilogy in fantasy, and it is complex. The characterizations were well done, and it features one of the best time travel stories that I've read. And time travel stories are rarely executed well. If you still haven't read the Licanius Trilogy yet, please give this a try. I think most readers, from what I've heard anyway, most readers who finally gave Licanius Trilogy a try end up loving it. So yes, please give it a try. And the next one is one of my top favorite completed fantasy series of all time, and it is The Banished Saga by John Gwynne. I think if you're on BookTube, if you're on YouTube, lately there has been a surge of people reading and praising The Banished Saga, and I am truly glad for it. But outside of YouTube, I don't think many people actually talk about The Banished Saga, or maybe only in recent years that people are talking about The Banished Saga. I remember reading the series the Faithful and the Fallen, the first series in the Banished Saga. I remember finishing it in 2017, and it was really hard to find anyone who read the series so hard. But now in the book community, it is much easier to find readers who have read and love the Banished Land saga. And yes, I think in a way, comparatively, this series can be still considered as underhyped, but not too underhyped. From my perspective anyway, from what I've seen, because John Gwynne definitely has been gaining traction ever since his release of the Bloodstone Saga, which began with the Shadow of the Gods and the sequel, The Hunger of the Gods. Because of this series, people who love reading Bloodstone Saga end up going through John Gwynne's bibliography of books. And yeah, that's great. I hope that John Gwynne will gain more readership because I think his books are amazing, especially the Banished Land saga. Then the next series in the bronze category is The Last War Trilogy by Mike Shackle. This is a series that I just finished reading last month. Yes, this trilogy has been recently completed, and this is one of my favorite trilogies. It has become one of my favorite completed trilogies. I think it is an amazing series with great characterizations and action scenes. The actions in the Last War trilogy are so compelling, and also they are so hard to put down. It is hard to put down. They are so vivid, immersive, and also if you love military fantasy, if you love grimdark fantasy, and you don't mind reading violence and gore in your books, this is your books. Please give the Last War trilogy a try. Or maybe if you want to see me appear again on a book, well, you can see me appear in the third book of the Last War trilogy, Until the Last. Whether I get killed or not, just like in Priest of Gallows, well, you have to find out for yourself. But I love this trilogy, and yes, this one is very much underhyped. If you check the ratings and also the number of reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, there are so few ratings and reviews for this trilogy. And the next series on the bronze category is Ash and Sand Trilogy by Richard Nell. I talk about Ash and Sand Trilogy a lot, and Ash and Sand Trilogy, it is a self-published fantasy trilogy, and still so few people talk about this one. I definitely agree that this is very much underhyped. So underhyped, so few people talk about this, and most readers who end up giving Ash and Sand Trilogy a read end up loving it, especially after they read the second book, Kings of Ash, which in my opinion is the best of the trilogy. So give this series a try, especially if you love Logan Ninefingers from the First Law. Yeah, I think there's a character here named Ruka, one of the main characters in Ash and Sand, and he is almost up there. He is almost up there with Logan Ninefingers as one of the best characters of all time. Well, Ruka is one of the best characters of all time. So if you love reading character-driven grimdark fantasy, give this series a read. You won't regret it. We still have two more series in the bronze category, and both of them are actually by the same author, but another one of them is co-written with another author, and this is Rook and Rose Trilogy by M.A. Carrick. I haven't read this one. The first book, Mask of Mirrors, I think I've heard about Mask of Mirrors from Elliot Brooks. Yeah, I remember that Al loved this one. And other than that, I haven't heard anything else about Rook and Rose Trilogy. I am actually quite surprised and also grateful to see this series being mentioned as one of the underhyped series because, well, I've always been interested in Rook and Rose Trilogy, and now that I heard that many people consider this to be one of the most amazing series that I've read but never get talked about, well, consider myself interested. And the next one, the final series on the bronze category, is The Memoirs of Lady Trent by Mary Brennan. So Mary Brennan is one of the co-authors behind Rook and Rose Trilogy, and the last series on this category, on the bronze category, it is for Memoirs of Lady Trent. I think many readers who have read this series agreed that if we give this series a try, we will end up loving it. And I don't think they're mistaken on this because I heard only great things. Every time people talk about Memoirs of Lady Trent, this is a 5-book series with one spin-off book. So technically it is a 6-book series. Every time I see anyone talk about Memoirs of Lady Trent, they always say they love it very much. And the cover art looks absolutely beautiful. The cover art is done by Todd Lockwood, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the books, all of them have interior artworks of the dragons done by Todd Lockwood, one of the best artists in fantasy. So I think I will make this series one of my priority series to read next year in 2023. I have always been interested in reading this series anyway, and now these are just the extra push I needed to make this a priority series of mine next year. And now we move on to the silver category. In the silver category, which is for underhyped fantasy series that get mentioned 5 times, there are 2 series on this list and I've read only one of them. For the one that I haven't read, it is for Rivers of London by Ben Aaronovitch. So this one is an urban fantasy series. Rivers of London, I think, is super popular in UK. Among UK readers, I think it is super popular. But I think the readers among 300 readers that I asked made a great choice in picking this one. Because yes, I rarely see people praise this series, even though, again, this is a very popular series on both Amazon and Goodreads. So many ratings, so many great reviews, but somehow so few people talk about it in YouTube, Instagram. Based on people and reviewers I follow anyway, I very rarely see Rivers of London being mentioned. And again, I'm still not too sure when I will give this series a try, but I'm certainly keeping this series on my radar for now because I always crave great urban fantasy series like Dresden Files, Ethereal Earth by Josh Erickson, and yeah, many more. I think urban fantasy series work really well as a palate cleanser, and some of them can get really epic and unpredictable. And I hope that Rivers of London, whenever I get to it, will deliver that for me. And the other series on the silver category is one of my favorite ongoing series right now. It is The 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. I've talked about this series plenty of times since 2019, and it makes me happy. It makes me super happy seeing that this series is mentioned as being underhyped. Well, I mean, I'm glad that people are starting to take notice of The 5 Warrior Angels as being underhyped, and that makes me happy, but I will be even happier if this series is not considered as underhyped anymore, because this series is awesome, it deserves to be popular, and also Brian Lee Durfee is a great person. That is a plus in my books. A great author who writes great books. What more could you ask? And also, yes, I think 5 Warrior Angels will work really well for those of you who love classic fantasy with a modern twist, with the modern narrative and also morally great characters in it. And before I forget, The Blackest Heart, the sequel to the first book, The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart is a huge improvement over The Forgetting Moon, and honestly, I am so looking forward to reading the final book in the trilogy, The Lonesome Crown, in November. If Lonesome Crown end up being as good as The Blackest Heart, then there is no doubt anymore that The 5 Warrior Angels will remain as one of my favorite trilogies of all time. And now we move on to the final category, and that is the gold category. In the gold category, there are 3 series, and these 3 series, each of them are mentioned 6 times. That's a lot. I've read only one of them. I haven't read 2 of them. I will begin with the one that I haven't read, and that is, the first one is The Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts. Wars of Light and Shadow has always been considered to be equivalent to Malazan in terms of complexity and also in terms of intricate world building. But again, it is a challenging series, and I think that kind of play a part in why the series is still underhyped to this day. But epic fantasy readers who already gave the series a try usually end up loving the series so much. And I actually put Wars of Light and Shadow as one of my top priority series to read within this year. But as I said, this one is complex, and I think it requires me to be in the right reading mood. And I don't want to start reading the series knowing that right now I'm not in the mood to read something as complex and heavy as Malazan Book of the Fallen. I don't want that, because I know that Janny Wurts is a great writer based on what I've read in Rift War Empire Trilogy and her standalone book to write Hell's Chasm. But yes, I think Wars of Light and Shadow will be read by me sooner than later. Philip Chase recently did a great review on the first book, Curse of the Mistwraith, and if you haven't checked out that review, if you haven't read the books yet, make sure to check out that review and see whether the book will be suitable for you or not. And then the next series in the gold category is Shadows of the App by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And I'm quite surprised to see this one being mentioned 6 times. I know that this is considered to be underrated, especially by Adrian Tchaikovsky fans. I mean, Adrian Tchaikovsky write a lot of books, so many books, but I think I can safely say that among all of his books, he is so popular for his Children of Time trilogy and his sci-fi books. Not too many people actually talk about Shadows of the App. 10 books, epic fantasy series, and I think Again, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is his first series before he ventured into more sci-fi books. Recently, The Broken Binding just released the special edition for the first book, and although not anytime soon, I think I will certainly give Shadows of the App a try because I have really enjoyed reading the sci-fi books by Adrian Tchaikovsky so far, especially Children of Time and also The Doors of Eden. So yeah, we'll see. And finally, the last series on this list, it is a trilogy, and I completely agree that more readers, more people should be talking about this series, and it is the Divine City Trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett, consisting of City of Stairs, City of Blades, and City of Miracles. Love this series so much, and honestly, it is kinda a sin that this trilogy hasn't been discussed by many readers. It deserves to be discussed, read, and reviewed by many readers. I think this trilogy is amazing. As I constantly said, I think Robert Jackson Bennett is one of the few authors that can combine three genres seamlessly: fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. These elements are always in the Divine City Trilogy and also his newest trilogy, the Founders Trilogy, and I think Robert Jackson Bennett blend them so well. Plus, the characterizations were always on point. Plus, both the Divine City Trilogy and also the Founders Trilogy, both of them actually has over-the-top actions that I think are so cool and unforgettable. Lastly, before I end this video, in the Divine City Trilogy, it has one of my favorite characters of all time, Sigurd J. Harkvaldson. I think Sigurd is one of the best characters in fantasy, and it is kinda a shame that so few readers, relatively few readers, know about this character. Sigurd is awesome. And it is not only Sigurd. The main characters in City of Stairs and the main characters in City of Blades are both awesome as well. So yeah, please give this series a try if you still haven't read it. So yeah, that's it for today's video. That's top 15 most amazing fantasy series that rarely or never get talked about according to 300 fantasy readers. Do let me know your thoughts on this video, and also please let me know how many series that I just mentioned that you've read and love. And if you want me to do another video like this one, maybe by asking overhyped fantasy series, do let me know in the comment section. This video has taken me hours to do, and I really hope that you will enjoy watching it, and I hope that you get something out of it, something beneficial out of it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.